The U.S. colonel warned that Russia could deal a fatal blow if Washington sent troops to Ukraine. Russian officials reveal how to shoot down F-16 over Ukraine. The EU's plan to ban Russian gas may not be approved. The U.S. colonel warned that Russia could deal a fatal blow if Washington sent troops to Ukraine. If the U.S. deploys troops in western Ukraine, Russia could deal a fatal blow to them, the former advisor to the head of the Pentagon, Colonel Douglas McGregor, said on the YouTube channel Judging Freedom. During the interview, host Andrew Napolitano asked the officer what would happen if the Americans wanted to send military force into Ukraine. Then they will go to war with Russia. This country will act decisively to crush them, experts predict. According to him, all logistics centers and military bases supporting the invaders will be destroyed by Russian missiles. Putin has made it clear what the consequences of NATO intervention are, McGregor said. According to the colonel, NATO is currently not interested in direct military clashes. Previously, French President Emmanuel Macron did not rule out the possibility of deploying military troops in Ukraine if Russia made a breakthrough on the front lines, and if Kyiv requested so. Press Secretary of the President of Russia Dmitry Peskov noted that the statements of representatives of Western countries about their readiness to send troops to Ukraine require a responsible, quick and effective response from Moscow. According to him, the nuclear exercises announced by Moscow last week are directly related to the latest threatening, provocative and escalating statements of tension on the continent by some European representatives. Russian officials reveal how to shoot down F-16 over Ukraine. GDNTD, the first F-16 fighters to appear in the skies of Ukraine will be aircraft donated by Denmark. The German publication Die Zeit has corrected its own news about the delivery of Danish F-16 fighter jets to the armed forces of Ukraine. In the new version, the above-mentioned fighters will arrive in Ukraine not next month, but within a few months. Journalists are said to have misunderstood the words of Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen. However, the Russian Air Defense Force did not care when the Fighting Falcon, another name for the F-16 is Fighting Falcon, arrived, because they were waiting and preparing. Reserve Colonel Sergei Katalev, former commander of the Air Defense Forces of the Russian Air Force Special Command, said, "The F-16 itself is a common target for air defense batteries and current weapon systems. Something like the S-400 will shoot them down without any difficulty." The purpose of deploying U.S.-made fighter aircraft in the skies of Ukraine is to use long-range air-to-ground missiles, which can be launched without entering the range of Russian air defenses. "I can assume that the West will provide Kyiv with a certain number of missiles or have already handed them over," Colonel Katalev continued. "But there is one thing to note: the Ukrainian Air Force must have air superiority in this area and possess AWACS aircraft on air duty. In addition, they need to overcome the interference that our electronic warfare system will cause. In addition, to launch long-range missiles, the F-16 will have to fly to high altitudes, where they will be detected not only by air defense radar, but also by Russian AWACS aircraft," Mr. Katalev emphasized. Before the analysis, Colonel Katalev said that a limited number of F-16 fighters would not be enough to cause a turning point on the battlefield. The EU's plan to ban Russian gas may not be approved. The EU's plan to ban Russian gas faces the risk of early failure because member countries can veto it. Politico reported that Hungary could veto the European Union's (EU) latest sanctions proposal on Russian liquefied natural gas, LNG. As part of the 14th sanctions package, the EU plans to target Russia's gas sector for the first time. According to Politico, the European Commission proposed sanctions against Russian LNG last week. These measures will prevent EU countries from re-exporting Russian LNG, but will not introduce a complete ban on supercooled gas imports into the European Union. Hungary expressed considerable reservations about the proposal. During initial diplomatic discussions last week, Hungary's top envoy warned that Budapest would block any measures that would lead to higher energy costs in Europe, according to Politico. "We will analyze the proposal, but do not support anything that could have a negative impact on the EU gas market," the Hungarian official said. France, Germany, Italy, and Spain have requested more technical information about the new sanctions, Politico noted, citing people present at the closed-door talks. According to Politico, promoting sanctions on LNG is a significant change in EU strategy. To date, the EU has not introduced any restrictions on liquefied natural gas. Russia used to be the EU's top supplier of pipeline gas, but after the start of the Ukraine conflict, the European Union sharply reduced imports from Moscow. The share of Russian pipeline gas in EU imports has fallen from more than 40% in 2021 to around 8% in 2023. However, EU member states remain dependent on Russian supplies. For pipeline gas and LNG combined, Russia accounted for about 15% of the EU's total gas imports last year, according to European Council data. Russian LNG continues to flow to the continent mainly through ports in Spain, Belgium and France. Some are then re-exported to countries such as Italy and Germany. Hungary has been critical of restrictions on Russia and has previously opposed EU sanctions packages, saying they hurt the EU itself more than Russia. To be adopted, the sanctions package needs support from all EU member states. When news of possible Russian LNG sanctions first emerged last month, Moscow said domestic producers would find a way around it. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov warned that any restrictions on Russian LNG, along with efforts to squeeze the country out of the energy market, will only lead to higher gas prices for EU consumers. In its 2024 market monitoring report published on April 18, the EU's Agency for Cooperation in Energy Regulation, ACER, said that reducing Russia's LNG imports should be approached with caution, especially as in the context that pipeline gas supply from this country is about to end at the end of this year. The report mentions the expiration of a 5-year contract to transport gas from Russia to Europe via Ukraine in December 2024. Ukraine announced that it has no plans to extend this agreement. If flows stop, the EU could lose 13.6 billion cubic meters of gas, equivalent to about 4% of last year's total consumption. Thus, Turkstream is the only remaining gas pipeline from Russia to Europe, passing through the Black Sea to Turkey and Bulgaria. The report said the EU is aiming to completely end Russia's dependence on fossil fuels by 2027. To achieve that goal, reducing LNG imports from the country needs to be considered on a case-by-case basis, starting with spot imports. ACER noted that Russia is the second largest producer of LNG in the Atlantic Basin after the United States. Russia is also the bloc's second largest LNG supplier after the US in 2023.